Wow, so is it really the end of the BMI? I mean, it just obviously it's wrong because look at how many athletes would be considered obese under BMI, right? Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Katie, and for those of you who don't know me, I used to weigh 360 pounds, and I've lost 180 pounds and kept it off for years now. And on this channel, we will discuss weight loss, weight maintenance, nonsense I see online about body positivity and fat acceptance, my experiences with all of that, and well, anything else I feel like talking about. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below, and let's get into today's video. So today I have a TikTok from our friend to the channel, Tess Holliday.
Miss Tess Holliday!
And she's ready to celebrate the end of BMI. So I figure we'll go ahead and watch this together, and I'll give you my reactions along the way.
I want to talk about something really exciting that has just come out today with the New York Times. And this is an article that is talking about how finally, like a lot of folks that exist in a larger body have been saying for so long, the BMI is an outdated method. What I love in here is that there's a doctor in here that's quoted saying that they were using imprecise methods that were outdated to try to gauge on what a healthy weight is.
Wow, so is it really the end of the BMI? Because I know that that is something that fat acceptance has been saying for years, that it just obviously it's wrong because look at how many athletes would be considered obese under BMI, right? So is this really the end?
The doctor went on to say as well that how do you determine what is an ideal weight versus a sick weight, especially if you're going by BMI, and that has proved nearly impossible to do. So I'm very excited for this. I'm very excited that they're at least having this conversation, and I am really crossing my fingers, especially over the next 4 years, that this is something that we look at a little bit more and we shed light on a little bit more, because there is not a lack of discrimination going around. There's quite a lot of it, and it would be really nice if this outdated method went bye-bye.
Okay, so evidently, according to our friend here, it might be going away soon, so why don't we go ahead and read the article ourselves and see what it actually has to say. Okay, so I do have the New York Times pulled up, and we've got the article right here. New obesity definition challenges current use of BMI. So let's go ahead and read through this and see if our friend is correct that they're changing the way they think about BMI. Obesity should be assessed in a way that goes beyond the standard measure of body mass index, or BMI, according to the new definition of the condition released by an international commission. Its report, published Tuesday in the Lancet Diabetes and Endocrinology journal, makes the case for focusing on how much body fat and what medical complications the person has, not just their weight. If the guidelines are widely adopted, they could change doctors' perceptions of who needs to be treated for obesity. They could also affect the use of prescription drugs that treat obesity, like Wegovy and Zepbound. The new definition of obesity was endorsed by 76 organizations around the world. The commission proposed that instead of continuing the current use of BMI as a way to define obesity, it should be used as a screening tool to determine who should be tested for excess body fat. Doesn't sound like it's going away, it just sounds like they're going to change how they utilize it, but they're still going to use it. So let's keep reading. The commission said that people who had a BMI over 25 and too much fat, but who were otherwise healthy, should pretty much be left alone. They should be monitored and counseled not to gain any more weight and possibly to lose some. Their condition would be called preclinical obesity. Okay, so it doesn't really sound like they're changing all that much if your BMI is over 25, so long as you don't have any complications because of that. But it does say they are going to start calling it preclinical obesity. And I know currently if you have a BMI over 25 but under 30, that puts you in the overweight category. But this would change it now to preclinical obesity. So much for the idea from fat acceptance that obesity is a slur and we shouldn't use it.
Hey, the word obese is garbage, and here's why. First, the word obese literally means something that's eaten itself fat, which is not only deeply stigmatizing, but it's also inaccurate for many fat people who are not fat because of eating.
Seems like they actually got rid of overweight and now are listing people as preclinical obesity. So, or at least if these recommendations are adopted. But let's see what else they have to say. Other people with any of the 18 medical conditions caused by obesity, 13 for children and adolescents, require medical treatment to improve their health and prevent serious injuries to organs. Their conditions include breathlessness, heart failure, hip or knee pain, metabolic abnormalities, and poorly functioning organs. Their condition would be called clinical obesity. Okay, I'm going to repeat that again. 18 medical conditions caused by obesity. And I'm going to stress that one more time. 18 medical conditions caused by obesity. And why am I stressing this so heavily? Because that is one of the main talking points of fat acceptance. That it's correlation and not causation. And that thin people get these diseases too. So you can't just say that it's being fat that causes this. I'm not saying it. It's right here in black and white from medical professionals. 18 different diseases in adults. 13 for adolescents or children. It's right here in black and white. Breathlessness, heart failure, hip or knee pain, metabolic abnormalities, and poorly functioning organs. Right here in black and white. So I just find it rather ironic that fat acceptance has dug their heels in repeatedly over and over and over again that it is correlation and not causation. And they will argue with people on the internet and they will spread tons of misinformation. But when they actually talk to medical professionals, this is what they say. And I also find it incredibly ironic that our friend here was celebrating the end of BMI, essentially, and now I'm questioning if she even read this article, or if she's just cherry picking out the things that she wishes were true from the article. So why don't we go ahead and read through the rest of this and see what else our friend may have missed while she was out cherry picking.
Ready, Miss Tessmucker?
The group said those with a BMI of 40 or greater have clinical obesity on the basis of their BMI alone. There is no need to assess their body fat. So she would still be obese. She's out here celebrating the end of BMI, essentially, and thinking that it's going to end discrimination or weight stigma or medical bias or whatever nonsense these groups try to tell themselves. When in reality, it sounds like they're still going to be using it and it would still classify her as obese. At least according to what I just read, anyone with a BMI over 40 would automatically be considered obese no matter what. And I know that her BMI has to be well above 40 because I know what mine was at my heaviest. And as a matter of fact, I just pull it up right now. This is the NIH website. And let's see, 5'9" and 360 pounds. Compute. My BMI was 53.2 at my heaviest. I still would have been obese at 360 pounds at 5'9". And I know for reference, our friend is considerably shorter than that. And I know at least when she went on the Cosmopolitan cover years ago, she said she was 300 pounds. And I would say she's probably gained considerable weight since then. So I think it's pretty fair to say that her BMI has got to be well north of 40. And yes, she would still be considered obese. So I'm not really sure why she's out here celebrating. They're still going to use BMI. They would still classify her as obese. So I'm genuinely curious now. Did our friend read any of this? Or did she just read through to cherry pick what she wanted to read? The simplest way for doctors to see whether someone has excess body fat is to wrap a tape measure around a person's waist, the group said. If a woman's waist is more than 34.6 inches, she most likely has too much fat. For a man, a waist the threshold would be at least 40 inches. And yes, that is how that sentence was written. That was very awkward to read. But it does sound like those guidelines actually do line up fairly similarly to the American Heart Association. I believe it's 35 for women and 40 for men. So that does line up with what I've heard from other sources as well. Other tools for health professionals include waist to hip ratios, waist to height ratios, or DEXA scans, a type of x-ray. The Commission's 58 experts spent years on the report, regularly meeting online. Instead of thinking of obesity as a disease, they wanted to assess it in a different way, said the Commissioner's chair, Dr. Francesco Rubino, a bariatric surgeon at King's College in London. The Commission's approach fits with that of the American Heart Association, which endorsed the report. Guess great minds do think alike, right? We struggled with the imprecise methods for defining what is a bad weight, said Dr. Mariel Jessup, Chief Scientific and Medical Officer at the Association. How do you define an ideal weight, and how do you define a sick weight? So you mean to tell me our friend read all the way down to this point before she got that quote to somehow celebrate the end of BMI?
Right, Miss Tess.
She glossed over everything else or just completely ignored it. They're still going to be using BMI. It's just going to be the first screening tool, or I guess technically the second after your height and weight, right? They're still going to be using it. It's just if your BMI is high enough, you'll also have one of these now too. Is our friend aware of this? Did she actually read this? Or did she just skim it to find a quote so she could make her TikTok? And then once again, cherry pick information to try to make their cause sound like it has any merit to it. When in reality, now she's just going to have to get measured at the doctors. Or, I mean, quite frankly, she won't even have to get measured because they're just going to take one look at her and say, honey, you're obese. We have eyes. We can see it. Doesn't matter what tool we're using. It's not good. And you should probably lose some weight. And that's the reality of it. And the fat acceptance reality is that they don't want any tool to replace BMI. They don't want weight brought up at all. They don't want to be weighed. They don't want their BMI taken. They're certainly not going to be happy about a tape measure. They probably don't have anything nice to say about like body fat percentage measurements and stuff like that. They're always going to dig in their heels at everything that points to their weight being an issue. But yet, our friend is also just cherry picking what she wants to hear to make it seem like they've got some sort of victory over this or something. We struggled with the imprecise methods for defining what is a bad weight, said Dr. Mariel Jessup, Chief Scientific and Medical Officer at the Association. How do you define an ideal weight, and how do you define a sick weight? We were asked many times, do you think obesity is a chronic disease? We were unhappy saying yes or no, she said. We think it's more nuanced. So you mean to tell me our friend read over half of this article before she got to that quote so she could cherry pick it and make it seem like it's some sort of victory that BMI is going away? Did she even read any of this? Did she read the rest of the quote? Whether or not obesity is a chronic disease? Because clearly doctors and medical professionals understand that this is an issue, that it also causes medical issues as well. But yet, she's cherry picking these quotes and making it seem like BMI is going to go away. When in reality, for a lot of people, it's going to involve now a measuring tape. And I'm genuinely curious how our friend or anybody within fat acceptance or body positivity is going to feel about this coming out of the doctor's office. We already know that many of them don't like or will refuse to have their weight taken at the doctor's office. They don't want to know about their BMI. They don't want to be told to lose weight. They don't want to be told that their conditions were caused by their weight. But yet, they also have some excuses kind of built in right now with BMI. We do know that bodybuilders and athletes, or anybody who's got a large amount of muscle, can skew into the overweight or obese category, even if they don't have a whole lot of body fat. So they do have an excuse kind of already built in, because that's something I heard so many times. Well, BMI is flawed because according to BMI, The Rock is obese. And invariably, the person who told me this didn't look a thing like The Rock, because none of us do. We are not elite athletes or bodybuilders, typically, and the vast majority of people that I heard saying that BMI was flawed because of that aren't going to be affected once they change these parameters either. They're still going to be considered obese. Because now we're going to have a tape measure out of the doctor's office. So I wonder what kind of excuses they're going to come up with now for a measuring tape, because they already have them for scales, they already have it for the BMI, but I'm wondering how they're going to do it now with the measuring tape. And again, it's just blowing my mind that our friend read over half of this article to find these quotes. And again, didn't even finish the quote because it's talking about obesity being a chronic disease. So I'm not really sure how she could cherry pick this and then claim it to be a victory at this point. Rebecca Poole, Deputy Director of the University of Connecticut's Rudd Center for Food Policy and Health, said she saw the Commission's approach as, quote, trying to reduce some misconceptions about obesity that could potentially reduce stigma. Obesity continues to be viewed as a character flaw rather than a complex health condition, she said. But it might be difficult for the new definitions to come into common use. For years, experts have complained about the reliance on BMI to define overweight and obesity. The index is easy to measure. All that is needed is a person's height and weight. It soon became the standard for defining whether people were underweight, overweight, or obese. And BMI is established as a major risk factor in diabetes, heart disease, cancer, and other conditions, said Dr. David M. Nathan, the professor of medicine at Harvard and founder of the Diabetes Center at Massachusetts General Hospital. He added that a large waist too was a risk factor, but unlike BMI, waist measurements are often performed incorrectly in medical settings. It is unrealistic, Dr. Nathan said, quote, to say that the whole world is going to change to this. Just as unrealistic, he continued, is saying obesity shouldn't be treated until complications arise. Quote, as they would have it, you wouldn't treat hypertension until the person has a stroke, Dr. Nathan said. Okay, so there was a lot covered in that section, and I gotta say, even if this does take a long time for it to roll out to doctors and hospitals, and doctors were trained how to properly measure people, I don't think too many people would be happy seeing a measuring tape come out of the doctor's office. Just gotta be honest. From my experience doing retail work, a lot of people were not happy to see me pull one of these out to do a bra fitting or a tux fitting. So I could just about imagine how those people were going to feel if they saw a doctor or a nurse pull out a measuring tape. Also, I do have to point out, a lot of people do not measure properly at all. I'm glad that they did address that, because even if they do go to these measurements, if you're like on that borderline and you don't get a proper measurement, that could be a problem. So just gotta say, I've seen a lot of crazy measurements over the years, and then when I do a measurement on people, and again, I was trained at 2 different jobs, one to do bra fittings and the other to do tuxedo rentals, and yeah, there are a lot of people that do not know how to measure. There just are a lot that do not know how to measure at all. So yeah, if they do adopt these standards, I definitely think there needs to be some training with the medical professionals on how to properly measure people. And yeah, from my experience, people are not going to be happy about that at all. Not even fat acceptance or body positivity people. Just, I think people in general, quite frankly, I think there's going to be a lot of people that would be upset by that. But let's go ahead and finish out this article. Although not everyone who is obese develops a serious health problem, quote, the number who don't develop some sort of weight-related complication is pretty small, Dr. Nathan added. Wow, so there it is again, in black and white. Not only does obesity cause health problems, but it causes health problems in the vast majority of people. And again, this was a whole bunch of medical professionals who worked on this for years. And these are their conclusions. But again, our friend is out here celebrating like BMI just got canceled and she just got a clean bill of health or something. When in reality, it's right here in black and white. Using the new standard may also have implications for the new obesity drugs and others headed to the marketplace. They are so expensive that some health systems that initially covered them for people with obesity, defined by their BMIs, decided they could no longer afford to do so. But Dr. David Cummings, a commission member and an obesity expert at the University of Washington, suggested that they could be restricted to patients diagnosed with clinical obesity. That group's needs, he said, are more compelling. And that is the end of the article. So it seems like our friend went through this entire article just to find that quote that said that BMI wasn't perfect. And she's out here acting as if it's over, when in reality, they would still be using BMI. They would just be using it in conjunction with other tools, either a tape measure or a waist to hip ratio, waist to height ratio, a body fat scan, something of that nature. And I mean, quite frankly, there are a lot of people who have talked about this beyond just fat acceptance and body positivity people. But yet the reaction from Tess, and I'm sure many others within fat acceptance, is that they're doing away with BMI. Because she either didn't read this article, she read it just enough to cherry pick something that was going to spin this in a positive light for her and make it seem like a victory for her side or something. Or she maybe used some really terrible AI to summarize it or something. I'm not really sure, because she clearly skipped over everything else that was addressed in this article. That there are health conditions caused by obesity, that those who are obese have a very high percentage of developing some sort of weight-related complication, and that they're not going to go away from BMI. They would just use it in conjunction with other tools of measurement. But very clearly it will still be there. And I have to say, this seems so par for the course for these movements. For fat acceptance and body positivity, they'll read these studies, they'll read these articles, and then they'll cherry pick what is going to make their side sound like the right side or the best solution, conveniently ignoring everything else that's talked about. But yes, evidently BMI is imprecise and outdated. So instead, we're going to use that in conjunction with a tape measure, waist to hip ratio, waist to height ratio, and no matter how we slice it, our friend is still going to be clinically obese. They're not even getting rid of the term. And that was something that they railed on for years about, that obesity is a slur and we shouldn't use the word obese. So at the very least, I'm glad to see that the medical community is sticking with facts and has a very different opinion than our friend and many within fat acceptance. But I guess I shouldn't be surprised that our friend has tried to mislead people about this, considering how many times she has misled people throughout her career, including her ED. So I guess it really is just par for the course for our friend and for fat acceptance, that they like to mislead people and misrepresent information to try to further their cause. But maybe that's just me. Let me know down in the comments below. What do you think? I'm genuinely curious and I love reading all of your responses. That is where we will leave things today. I thank you so much for joining me. Please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I will catch you all in the next one. Bye! Oh, were you asleep, honey? You look so sleepy. Oh, baby. Should we rub your little toe beans until you fall back asleep? Shall I rock you like a baby? What do you think? Should we watch the game? Yeah, you like it? Oh, yes. Are you excited for the Cavs? I know Mommy's excited for the Cavs. You ready to watch the Cavs? Yeah. Bye!